love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. Ah, weddings, wonderful things, but nobody has a wedding story where something didn't go wrong. The in-laws, the dress, oh my. Let me tell you my story. There was a lot of learning in it also. Well, my lady at that point and I, we had been together for about 2-3 years, and it was a very rocky 2-3 years. The joke among all our friends was that there was always a moving van parked in the driveway. She was moving out, I was moving out. But finally, we decided we could make a go of it. And we decided it was time to get married. Well, we were living in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts, to get a wedding license, you got to get a blood test. Needles terrify me, and that was almost enough to get me to call it off, but you know, enough good old single malt scotch, and I was ready for it, and so we got it. But what we decided to do was to get married at my parents' house in Westchester County, New York. And I had a Massachusetts license, and I wasn't sure if I could use in New York. So what I did was I called Albany, New York, the capital of New York State, and true story, it's called the Bureau of Marriage and Dog Licenses. Can't help but wonder if they're trying to tell you something there. But at any rate, I called them to ask them, and they said, no, I would need to get a New York license. I could come down and pick it up on the way, but they would accept a blood test from Massachusetts. Oh, thank God. So we were driving down. It was Thursday. We were going to head down to my parents' house in Westchester County, and I decided I would stop in Valhalla to get the marriage license. It was something that just struck me. Valhalla just sounded like a good place to get it. But when I stopped at the town hall in Valhalla, Valhalla was really too small, and what they told me was I had to go to the county seat in White Plains to pick it up. Well, it wasn't that far. We went to White Plains, we went in, we picked up the marriage license, and as we're walking out, they had a new bride pack that they wanted to give Beverly. Beverly had been married previously, and she was wondering, you think I should take it? I said, yeah, take it. At any rate, we took it, had all the stuff that new brides need. It had some laundry soap powder samples, some dishwashing liquid, some douche powder, all of the stuff that new brides needed. Well, we thought this was pretty funny, but you know, we took it and we headed to my folks' house. It's Saturday morning, and we're going to the synagogue where I'm going to do the opening prayers for the Torah reading. All my relatives and friends are there, you know, getting us ready for the wedding. And I'm up there and reading everything, and everything goes fine. And at the end of the service, what I do is I hand the rabbi the ketubah. Now, a ketubah is kind of the old ancient Jewish marriage contract. Basically, I'm buying her for, you know, 3 camels and 2 goats and, you know, 20 shekels or something. And it was done by a Talmudic scholar friend of mine, Stu, who as a wedding gift had hand-scribed it. Well, the rabbi looked at it and read it, and it was very, very impressed. It was on beautiful parchment paper and everything, but he kind of looked at me and said, this is for a woman who's been married previously. And I said, yeah, Beverly has been married previously, at which point he took me, my father, and my uncle Hershey into the rabbi's study. The doors shut. Beverly was left out in the sanctuary wondering what's going on. And the rabbi asked me, has she gotten a Jewish divorce? I didn't know, I didn't think so, you know, she wasn't very religious. And he said, you know, we've got to get her to get a divorce, because unless she's divorced, any children you have can only marry non-Jews or converts. I said, well, what do we have to do? And he said, well, it's still the Sabbath. I can't do anything yet. After sundown, I'll make some calls and see what I can do. In the meanwhile, you need to contact her ex-husband. Well, I came out, I told Beverly about what happened. I said, do you know where Sydney is? The only thing we knew was that Sydney, who had been on the art faculty at the University of Massachusetts, was now on the art faculty at Swarthmore College. And that's all she knew. Well, I did some digging and I found the phone number for the chairman of the art department at Swarthmore, and I made the call. I got his wife, who answered. I explained the situation, and she said that her husband was out on the golf course, and as soon as he comes back, she would have him call us. Well, a couple hours later, we're sitting around waiting. We got the phone call. What the chairman told us was that Sydney had left New York and went back to the University of Massachusetts for the weekend. And I thanked him, and so we thought and said, well, if he's coming to UMass, he must be seeing Gary. Gary was another faculty member with the art department, good friend of Sydney's, also a good friend of Beverly. So we called Gary, say, Gary, have you seen Sydney? And Gary told us, yes, he was here, but he left and went out to see his mother in Fall River, Massachusetts. All right, well, Beverly calls Sydney's house in Fall River, his mother's house, and she's on the phone. Hello, Sydney, how are you? I'm getting married tomorrow. We have to get divorced. Silence, as you could well imagine. And, well, Sydney, no, I don't really know what we have to do. Could you just please make sure you hang around your mom's house, and as soon as I have more information, I'll call you back? Great, thank you. Well, finally, sundown. An hour later, the rabbi calls us and says that he was able to convene a divorce committee so we could get divorced tomorrow. Could we get Sydney down? Well, this is New York. Sydney's in Fall River, Massachusetts. My uncle Hershey, who's there, says, no problem. I will drive there, I will pick him up, and I will bring him back. And I say, no, that's crazy. It's like, 4 or 5 hours each way. I asked the rabbi, do you suppose I could do something that maybe we could use telephones? I could hook up an amplifier to the phone so that he could speak and we could hear everything. And I had an old tape recorder with which I could do this. This was, 1970. We didn't have all this fancy stuff back then. And the rabbi said, yeah, I think that'll be okay. Sunday morning, we get into the car with Hershey, put in my tape recorder, we head down to the Bronx to the rabbi's apartment. We knock on the door, the rabbi's wife greets us, she's there with her kerchief on, invites us in, and there on the walls are the paintings of the rabbis, all in deep thought, overlooking the Holy Scriptures. Beverly, who really didn't know much about Judaism, all of a sudden feels like she's in a Chaim Podik novel, all new. The rabbi's wife comes back carrying her tray with hot water and the jar of Maxwell House instant coffee to offer us if we need anything. There's another couple there that have just finished their divorce, and it's now our turn. We walk into the sanctuary, and there's the rabbi, and I hook everything up to the telephone. I put up the speakers, and there are 3 old men, long beards, high hats. They're the court. And the rabbi says to Beverly, I'm going to need to ask you some questions that only a husband would know so that we know we're speaking to the right person. She panics. The rabbi goes, oh, no, nothing like that. Just kinds of questions like where you met, what you eat, everything. And so we calmed down and the rabbi asked us these questions. We called Sydney. We had told him the night before to expect a phone call from us in the morning, and we would be in a divorce proceeding. And the questions were asked. And Sydney got every single question correct, except for one. He couldn't remember the name of their little kitten that they had for a short time, Paiwaki. The questions were over. The rabbi looks at the men. 95%. The three men go, 100%, 100. And this goes on back and forth for a while. And finally, the rabbi talks them into it. They say, okay. Now, to get a Jewish divorce, the husband has to give the paper upon which the decree is written. The rabbi says, will you make me your agent? Sydney goes, yes. And with that, as his agent, he gives himself the paper from Sydney. We hang up, everything is written out, and then the paper is folded in some strange Talmudic fashion. The rabbi tells Beverly to take the paper, stick it under her arm, and hold it, and pace back and forth 3 times. At the end of which, she's to pick up her hand. The rabbi catches the paper, takes out a knife, slashes it, and the divorce is final. At that point, Hershey takes Beverly back to the house. I drive out to the airport to pick up the guests. Now, I have to tell you about Hershey. We emigrated to this country when I was 4 and a half. And we had a little 4-room apartment in the Bronx. And my father brought over the rest of the family, 3 brothers, 1 sister, and they all lived with us for a time in this small 4-room apartment. And I remember going down to the docks in New York when Hershey was coming by ship. Hershey was my favorite uncle, turned out to be. And Hershey was a big man. He was 6'3", 235 pounds. This is Hershey. I was 10 years old when I went with my father down to the New York docks. And when Hershey came off the boat, I ran to him, and a customs agent grabbed me. And Hershey looked at him and said, "You leave him alone. That's an American boy." And the customs officer looked at Hershey and said, "American boy, you wait there for your uncle." A big man, one I loved, and he had this enormous Cossack mustache. And when I saw that, I said, I'm going to have a mustache like that. Since high school, I have had a mustache, and this is always to remind me of Hershey and the family. Beverly told me later that when they were driving back to the wedding, Hershey pulled out a bunch of letters. And these were letters from a woman that he was still communicating with, a woman that he was deeply in love with, a woman who was not Jewish. Hershey lost his wife and his 4-year-old daughter. They were murdered at Auschwitz. And as much as he loved this woman, what did all that mean? How could he marry a non-Jewish woman? What would that have meant? What would all those losses have meant? For us, the Holocaust was still very real. And as Beverly told me the story, it made me remember all of the Holocaust stories and how much of my life was influenced by those stories in my family, a lot of which I never knew. I remember being in America and noticing all my friends had grandparents. I had none. And when I asked my parents, why don't I have grandparents? They just kind of got real quiet and just said, they died. They too were murdered at Auschwitz. I only found out later. I came back with the guests to the wedding, and we went in, and the wedding was to begin. And Beverly and I were standing underneath the chuppah. And the chuppah is kind of a covering that's outside that is held at 4 posts under which you get married. And the rabbi looked at us and said, "I can't tell you how glad I am here." It was important for my family that our rabbi was there to perform this wedding. But my family also, they weren't going to take any chances. The rabbi asked us if we could hold the wedding off for a week. They said, "How? The caterers are coming tomorrow." My father, though, he had a backup rabbi just in case. But we didn't need that backup rabbi. He said how glad he was there to do it for us. And I said how glad I was that he could do this for us. For now I really understood my uncle on a much deeper level, and my family on a much deeper level than I ever had before. You can't have one, you can't have one, you can't have one without the other.